They'll take away guns, they'll take away our sovereignty. They're already starting to put all the global framework in with this bullcrap called global warming. This is an effort to globalize and tie together everybody on the planet, is it not?
Sure. If you say all problems are global in dimension, then it's not much of a leap of logic to say you need global solutions, and what better place to have them than in the UN or comparable institutions.
So,
if we continue to follow the trend in which we are heading today, two things will inevitably result. One, a loss of our personal freedom, and two, financial bankruptcy. This is the price we pay when we turn away from God and the principles which He has taught and turn to government to do everything for us. It is the formula by which nations become enslaved.
In the last 15 or 20 years, an intense push around the world to have this globalized economy, which has been against the sovereign interests of nations and people. In preparation for the kind of breakdown and borderless world, no national sovereignty, that has for years said, we must have the World Trade Organization, we must have free trade.
In 1973 and 4, when I first sat in the board meetings with the oil company officials and found out that there positively was a plot for the control of America and the world with finances and its people by a group of power elite, and heard the top echelon oil companies officials saying it and telling about it in their own words.
1963, Walt Roscoe, then chairman of our State Department Policy Planning Board, wrote, quote, "It is a legitimate American national objective to remove from all nations, including the United States, the right to use substantial military force to pursue its own interests. Since this residual right is the root of national sovereignty and the basis for the existence of an international arena of power, it is therefore an American interest to see an end to nationhood as it has been historically defined," unquote. This is the communist plan to destroy this nation as an independent, freedom-loving power.
I took Kirk to Universal Mission Command's extensive research libraries that house the key works of the universe written on all types of materials and multimedia devices from different inhabited worlds, cultures, and languages. Immortal beings, angels who guard the archive say that new libraries from different inhabited worlds are being created all the time as each world's inhabitants continue to keep their own particular records, histories, diaries, documentaries in their own languages. Thus, they say, there is no end to the histories of inhabited worlds that have been, now are, and will yet be. Though I was interested in exploring the goings-on of other worlds, I had to stay focused on what was required for the mission at hand. It wasn't like I didn't have time to explore, because I'd had many times before through time looping. But it was because we needed to learn more about how, when, and by whom global killer weapons were constructed in Earth's history, and why. Time looping devices made it possible for mortals like us to take the time to learn many things at school or while on training sessions, where the time it cost to learn many things were reclaimed. It was taken out of the equation, the sum. It made it possible to spend a lifetime of learning things, but the time spent was subtracted from your lifetime. You'd go back to that time. Thus, time looping looped you back to the moment when you started. Thus, by going back into time to the moment when you started, the memory of what was learned and experienced was still there, while the time was reclaimed. Time looping could be abused for evil purposes too, so it was also controlled, as were other devices. Thus, with the other training we did, the investigations, research, communicating with old vets who had been on missions to the same types of places, times, and worlds, all this had to be done, but didn't have to cost us any of our lifetimes because of time looping. As we watched different documentaries, heard what to us were old radio shows, read original manuscripts or copies of others, and read key books that were suggested to us, we learned that a worldwide secret combination sought to overthrow the freedom of all lands, nations, and countries. That they would use the rivalries between the races, nations, cultures, and peoples to divide and conquer. And that they would send in provocateurs to provoke each side to start warring against each other or spread hate towards each other. Influenced by the fallen angels, hate was thus spread and inventions given for good were perverted for bad. Provoked into fighting each other, those seeking to reduce world population would then feed off of the hatred, war, and war machines started by arming, loaning funds, fueling, and managing both sides of the conflicts or crisis. In these settings, scientists were called upon to keep coming up with all kinds of new imaginative forms of bringing about death by many different inventions that they came up with. As they continued to invent endless ways of taking life rather than healing and preserving life, the population of the world began to be reduced as was part of the globalist plans. As they progressed in their weaponry, and as each weapon became the mother of other weapons, eventually they would discover another global killer weapon that had to be confiscated by cosmic agents and guardian angels. If the good angels and agents didn't do this, the sum of their choices in being neglectful or failing to complete their missions would be the possibility that fallen angels would gain knowledge that another global killer weapon was invented and constructed, and they tried to get at it in order to threaten, abuse, enslave, hold ransom, or destroy entire inhabited worlds. In some cases, these global killer weapons were known and were even inspired and communicated to the scientists who were evil scientists in making global killer weapons. Inventions, powers, and other devices that had many benefits for good were sometimes suppressed and hidden from the fallen angels, who knew that such inventions sometimes could be also perverted for evil purposes. Nuclear energy can light up a city or blow up a city, depending on how it is used. Kirk and I found in the archives old tape recordings of those who praised world government, warned against it. Robert McNamara, World Bank, telling how population's growth was a crisis, and said,
and I predict that if we continue as we are, by the end of this century, there will be widespread adoption of coercive policies, national coercive policies restricting the freedom of individual, leading to, for example, forced sterilization, restricting movements from rural to urban areas, and stimulating what I call brutal family practices, high rates of abortion and high rates of female infanticide. That's what lies ahead of us. That's what lies ahead of the world, unless we deal more effectively with this problem.
The world is to be subject to war.
Well, I have been looking at the New Age movement starting in 1981, and we're working quite openly on its face for three major goals: a new world order. Gorbachev's speech sounded like it came right smack out of the classic New Age material. We could have unity and diversity, and we need a new world order.
И понять в корне того, что мир развернулся в своем движении в другом направлении к новому мировому порядку. I think even that does not describe why the world has changed so much and why the world has turned so much toward a new world order and a new kind of civilization.
One portion of one camp of the world will have to die, but the world will have to be purged of negative elements to usher in the new age.
We watched old historical documentaries, listened to ancient radio shows, and talks given by Bob Salter, Anthony Sutton, Anthony J. Hilder, Mills Crenshaw, Ezra Taft Benson, Jack Stockwell, Barbara Jean, Alex Jones, Eustace Mullins, Craig Hewlett, Gary Allen, Glenn Beck, Jesse Ventura, J. Reuben Clark, and many others, who all warned against the dangers of secret combinations seeking to do away with the U.S. Constitution, national sovereignty, and Bill of Rights by merging U.S. into a world body, one world government, new world order. We tracked down actual talks by those who spoke openly in favor of this, even though they were in different high positions in government and had sworn oaths to defend and protect the U.S. and Constitution against enemies, foreign and domestic. These were the same people who had the connections with the military and industrial complex that had the funding, sciences, manufacturing, and political backing for the making of different types of weapons for their prolonged wars. Thus, this was where we were pressed to look. For if anyone had the abilities to make global killer weapons and the motives that are seeking to reduce and control Earth's population, it most likely was.
Yet in this new age, such attitudes are self-defeating. Given our interdependence, any world order that elevates one nation or group of people over another will inevitably fail.